The title of our symposium is The Justice of God. And as you'll see on the next slide, I'm making a first focus. So the next slide will show you. You see, I'm talking about the distributive justice of the biblical God. 2 words. In ordinary everyday language, I find that when people are saying, we demand justice, let's say there's been a terrible crime committed, a child has been killed, the parents are demanding justice, and it's perfectly legitimate. But that is retributive justice. And you couldn't have retributive justice unless the basic meaning of justice was distributive justice. Otherwise, retribution would not be distributed fairly. So the basic meaning of justice, unqualified, when it appears in the Bible, unqualified, is the fair distribution of whatever we're talking about. Fair distribution of goods, of services, of punishments, if you will. But distributive justice is the primary logical meaning of justice. That's constitutive for me. Secondly, I'm talking about the biblical God. And if anyone in the audience is thinking, I couldn't care less about the Bible or its God, fine. Let's turn to the next slide, because here's what the focus is really on. I'm going to be looking at the distributive justice of creation. And you're still kind of stuck about with creation in Genesis 1 against the escalatory violence of civilization in Genesis 4. I'm not just picking them out at random and juxtaposing them. They are set up against one another. So if you're not interested in Bible or God or anything else, think of the human race, that's us, caught between distributive justice and escalatory violence. And we're not sure which is going to win in that conflict. So then going to the next slide. This gives me the first part. There'll be 2 parts, obviously. The first part is about the distributive justice of creation. And I've been saying in Genesis 1 for short, but it's actually, and this is important, it's in Genesis 1, 1 to 2, 4a. Sorry to go carving up verses, but people put them together, we shouldn't. So we're looking at the first creation account, we often call it. And the picture there is one of the few pictures I have, actually. It's an image from Monreale Cathedral in Palermo. It's of God resting on the 7th day. And God looks bored stiff. I don't think God's enjoying the Sabbath. So I want to be very careful. I'm going to be talking about the Sabbath as the crown of creation and the whole thing heading for the Sabbath. If God is bored, that's God's problem. Also, if the Sabbath for us is nitpicking about you can't do this and you can't do that, please wipe that all out of your mind and try and listen as if we'd never heard the word Sabbath before and we want to know what it's about. So leave God to be bored if God is bored on the Sabbath, but open our minds to see we don't know what this Sabbath business is, though the story does warn us that we humans are not the crown of creation. We are the work of a late Friday afternoon. And generally speaking, best work is not done on late Friday afternoon. So I'm going to be heading for the Sabbath. Moving then to the next slide. Why? This is what any Jewish or Christian kid who's reached the age of reason, and where reason has not been squelched, will say, how come this God whom people are telling me is all powerful takes a week to create the world? Couldn't God just do it by, let there be a universe in an instant? So what's going on? All right, now let's get into some source criticism and the meaning of it. Look down, first of all. Well, let me take you through it. Somebody reading Genesis 1 and 5 notices that the creator is called Elohim in Hebrew. And if person is paying attention, or to the translation even, reading Genesis 2 and 4, that's the story of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, this creator is called Yahweh Elohim. Okay, don't know why, but that's the way it is. Secondly, you'll notice that in 5:3 of Genesis, Seth is the firstborn son of Adam and Eve. But over in 4:1, you've been told that Cain is the firstborn son of Adam and Eve. Okay, hold on to that. Then you notice that there's two ways of talking about creation. You can talk about the heavens and the earth being created in 2:4a, conclusion of the first creation account. And at the start of the second, God made the earth and the heavens. No big deal, really, but something is going on that makes inquiring mind want to know. Or our 7-year-old kid who just reached the age of reason, which must be squashed as soon as possible to handle the Bible. So what scholars say is there are four sources in the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch. And if you're really thinking, you might say, how come 4? How come not 3 or 5? Why 4? Is it totally arbitrary? No, it's not. There are 2 powerful literary centers in the ancient world, palace and the temple. Just as there is today, state and church, or state and mosque, or state and temple. Anyway, so there's 2 different focuses, 2 people who can write an account of what's going on. The temple, priests in the temple, the retainers in the palace. But Israel divides north and south. So we get 4. We get 2 from the north, 2 from the south. So we're looking now at the priestly source from the south, dates to about 400 BCE, and the Yahwist, it's called because of the name of God, obviously, from about 900, about 500 years before it. And when you look at it, it's fascinating because this priestly source sort of frames, if you will. It comes up first, and then Genesis 2 and 3, Adam and Eve, Genesis 4, Cain and Abel come in, and then the same way, like we pick up where we left off. You can look down there at my footnote, God created male and female, etc., and that's picked up again in 5. So something has happened. Somebody has decided that this Yahweh source, which is a great story, Adam and Eve in the garden, Cain and Abel, marvelous way to start the story. Who decided and why to put another account up front and to make God work for a whole week, as it were? So much work that God needed a rest. What's going on? Moving to the next slide then. Very briefly, that is the tomb of Cyrus the Great, by the way, at Pasargadae in Iran. I saw it in Easter of 66. It's one of the more, you just stand there in awe. Not because it's huge or pump. It's just there. And it's serenely magnificent. It comes from an emperor who knows exactly who's in charge and doesn't have to show off, as it were. Okay, in any case, as you know, Babylonian exile, the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem, took the elites, all the leadership there, around 599 BCE. But then the Persians came, destroyed the Babylonians. Just what, 60 years later? Wow. And they had a completely different foreign policy. One way of putting it is that Cyrus the Great really invented the Marshall Plan a little ahead of time. So if you want to move to the next slide, for example, he boasts on this is called the Cyrus Cylinder, the British Museum, excavated in what's now Iraq in Babylon. And it's a record of the decisions that Cyrus made in setting up, let's call it his foreign policy. And the foreign policy he set up, going to the next slide, makes a lot of sense. And not just because he was really a nice guy, but because he was a really good ruler. So you can see in the next slide, then what his policy was. And his policy was this. Wouldn't it make more sense to put all those conquered peoples, conquered territories by the Assyrians and the Babylonians back on their feet so they could pay their taxes? Rather than going out every springtime and looting them, let's set them up to pay their taxes. There in the center, you can see the quotation from the cylinder. He boasts that he's returned the gods to their sanctuaries. That's the first thing. So therefore, he tells the Jews in Babylonian exile, in effect, and he's paying for it. It's paying for it because this is foreign policy. Go back home, set your house in order, get your laws in order. No wonder that Isaiah, in that ecstatic moment when the return has just been announced, Cyrus is the Messiah. Then you can see down below, Chronicles and Ezra says the same thing. He sends them home and tells them to set up their laws. Now, he wouldn't use this term. Get your Bible in order. Get it assembled. But getting their laws meant getting their Bible. So then, moving to the next slide, here's what he's up to, of course. You can see it on the royal throne room. It stays still there in Persepolis when you were able to go to Iran without getting killed, probably. So the Persian restoration of peoples was for annual imperial tribute. Those people are obviously not bringing the official tribute, but a token of it. So what's going on is around the year, towards the end of the 500s, let's say, Israel is back home and they have a mandate. They're Persians didn't send Persian people to rule them, so they have a Jewish person in charge, under the Persians, of course. And their first thing is, get your law in order. Get your country set up. Get yourself back. So they have, in effect, to assemble their Bible, and it's going to be done, obviously, under the priests, because the kings haven't come back, shall we say. So it's going to be done by the priestly source. They're going to get to assemble it. So moving that to the next slide. I'm going to shift now to a different scene, but I want you to hold on to what we've got. Imagine you're there, as it were, in the symposium room. And you're among the priests, and they're assembling the Bible. Now they're going to get to write the overture. We're going to tell you what comes up, what we want you to see, the lens to which you will read this whole Bible. No, we're not going to start with Adam and Eve. It's a great story, but we want an overture. We want something that you will see. So I'm taking you now to a different moment for background. This is a magnificent tapestry. It's actually not a tapestry, it's a weave. So it was done by women, not men. It's from Girona, also spelled Gerona. That's a city to the northeast of Barcelona, closer to the Pyrenees. And if you've watched the Game of Thrones, you've seen lots of huge chunks of the medieval walls and the cathedral steps of Girona, whether you knew it or not. Look at this for the moment. In the center is the Creator. Around him is Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. They're running them together. And then the winds, the four winds, north wind up there in the top left corner. We're heading from circles into squares when we arrive. And then all around it, braided badly to the right and the bottom, of course, are the seasons and the months. So human labor, agricultural labor, you notice, not much about what people do in cities, are built into are born from the creation. And I want to hold on to that as my background, because when we're reading the Bible and we're talking about work, it's especially agricultural work. But I also want you to be careful about something. Look at that wider circle. The top half is the creation, the first 4 days. Then look down at the bottom of the bottom one, the middle of the bottom one, sorry. You see the birds and the fishes. Okay, we're up to the 5th day. Now, wait a minute. What should come up next is the 6th day and the 7th day. Look what you've done on either side. We've skipped all of a sudden into the garden. So on the right, the animals are there, and Adam alone is naming them. Then over on the other side to the left, Eve is coming from Adam. So what is happening here is all over medieval churches. I'm using this as an illustration. From St. Mark's in Venice to Moriale in Sicily. All of a sudden, after the 5th day, we skip the 6th day and the 7th day, and all of a sudden we're in the garden. Ouch, we've lost the Sabbath. So be very, very careful. Moving then to the next slide. I'm focusing on Genesis, the first creation account, and all the clues that the author gives to the intention that this is poetry. This is poetry, people, and self-conscious poetry. It's as if to say, I don't know how it was done, but this is what it means. So you get similar refrains. God said, let there be, and there was. God called. God said it was good. Evening and morning. Keep coming up, as if God can't come up with a new thing each day. Then the second point, you get 3 days of preparation, as it were, and 3 days of population, you might say. So day and night, sun and moon, sky and waters, fish and birds, land, sea, vegetation, animals, humans, and food. And then what you're being told is all of this leads to the 7th day. Now, you still don't know, well, what's the big deal? So God needed the rest. Good for God. Going to the third one. The authors, these priestly authors, they would have been men, of course, find that they have 8 chunks of creation. Chunks. But wait a minute. We can't have God resting on the 9th day. So we're going to shoehorn 8 chunks into 6 days. And that's the big giveaway. So day 1, let there be. Day 2, let there be. Day 3, let there be, let there be. 2 lets. Day 4, 1. Day 5, 1. Day 6 again, balancing. 2, let there be's. All of this is magnificently balanced. Not because the people are neurotic or obsessive compulsive. They're building a hymn to creation. And like any good hymn, it's poetic. In a way, if it was given away on the first day, we very often say, the first day God said there be light, and do some magnificent discussions of why did light come from. Read it. When all else fails, read the text. God didn't create light he created light, and darkness was already there, of course, in order to have day and night. Because how are you going to have a week of days unless you get day and night organized the first day? So, of course, the authors know that it's the moon and the stars and the sun that give light, but we got to get day and night up front, or we can't have day 1, day 2, day 3. So the week, everything is saying the week is important, because if you don't have a week, you don't have a 7th day. Moving to the next slide. This is something I really want to underline. In all of this first creation account, there are no sanctions. God never says, and by the way, if you guys don't do what you're supposed to do, boy, you're going to get it. Where are the sanctions? There are no sanctions because in Genesis 1, we humans are made in the image and likeness of God, made to be stewards of creation. And what if we don't do it? What if we destroy creation? Well, we destroy ourselves. Image and likeness is our destiny, our identity. If you disobey your identity, as it were, don't talk about punishments, talk about consequences. If you think you're a bird and you go up to a 30-story building, get on the roof and try to fly, don't say God hit you with the pavement as a punishment. You destroyed your identity. And when you destroy your identity, you're dead. No sanctions are needed because this is not about a decree of God. That God likes this idea of distributive justice and imposes it on us as a law. But if we don't, it's all right. There's always forgiveness and mercy. No, this is our identity. Go do it. Go do with it what we will. But there are consequences. Anyway, moving to the next slide. Now, here's my summary. And look at the picture first. That lovely shot by Sarah is taken in Monreale, of course. And you can see God is creating on the 5th day, the birds and the fish, everything is fine. Then we go to day 6. Ouch. Okay, the animals are there from the morning, but in the afternoon, as it were, God creates Adam. Where is male and female? And then, of course, as I showed you before, on the 7th day is there, but I wouldn't see that as a great recommendation for the Sabbath, whatever it means. So God took a rest and God looks bored. Now look up at the text. Genesis 1 to 2:4a, 1:1, is the new overture created by the priests for their assembled Bible to emphasize creation by the God of distributive justice. Now we have to watch that and see if that holds up. For example, days 1 to 5, God distributes God's own being. Let it be to everything. Everything. There's no really emphasis that this gets more than that. It gets its own day separately for emphasis. God distributes God's own justice. God's own being justly, sorry. Then, of course, on day 6, what God distributes is rule. We humans, male and female, in case there's any mistake, are made in the image and likeness of God, which means we are given God's, well, we're stewards of creation, let me put it that way. God hands over to us the running of the world. Running, as we'll see now, according to Sabbath rest. We're not just given it and told to go do what you want. The dominion is guided, formed, ruled by Sabbath rest, which then becomes Sabbath day, year, and jubilee. All right, moving to the next slide. Now we go through that. Oh, this is just to remind you again. Here's another example. It's a gorgeous picture. But look, the animals are there from, as it were, the morning. But in the afternoon, the Latin says that God created, creavit dominus, abbreviated, hominem. Well, hominem might mean male and female, but no, it doesn't. In God's own image. So again and again in these magnificent creation scenarios, you move very quickly from, let me put it, noon on Friday into the garden. And you lose the Sabbath. And you lose the whole core of the Bible, I'm going to say bluntly. All right, moving then, let's take a look at what it means. Sabbath day and distributive justice. It's one of the commandments, as you know, depending how you count them, the 3rd or the 4th. But it's not just we get a rest. Everyone gets a rest. The mandate in the middle there to the right is for you. Who's you? Well, it's not just the father, because there's nothing there about you, your wife, your son. You is the parent, the householder, if you will, keep it ungendered, are the parents, the householder, your son, your daughter, your male, female slave, your livestock, the alien resident in your towns. This is distributive justice. It's not just, oh, you guys get a rest. A Roman aristocrat would say, of course, otium is what the whole meaning of aristocracy, rest, otium. Negotium is what those other people have to do every day. We have otium. This is not just about rest. It is about rest for everyone. And you can say, well, but it's different. Well, maybe it's different, but that's a separate issue. It's for everyone. Moving to the next slide, which is simply another version of the third and fourth commandment. That one is from Exodus. This is from Deuteronomy. The previous one bases all of that on creation, as we just saw. This is based on your historical experience in Egypt. You were slaves yourself. But again, you or your son or your daughter or your male or female slave or your ox or your donkey or your chickens or any of your livestock are the resident alien in your towns. It is about distributive justice, this rest. All right, moving to the next one then. We're moving up onto the Sabbath year. And up at the top there, I took the image from the Girona tapestry weaving. You have the year there, Latin annus in the middle, and the 4 seasons from left to right, summer, fall, winter, guys, all wrapped up in this cloak, and spring. The first of 3 acts of distributive justice that go with the Sabbath year, every 7th year. Debts have to be remitted. Every 7th year, a remission of debts. That's the first act of distributive justice. We're trying to get back. The whole logic of these laws is, look, says God, I tried to do it right, and you guys really messed it up. Now, all of this law, if you will, is just trying to get back to where it was. So moving to the next slide, we see the second of the 3 acts of distributive justice, slaves freed. Now, in Israel, we're not talking really of a slave economy. We're talking about slaves who had to be sold into slavery, maybe to save the family farm. And again, 7 years. After 7 years, you have to be freed and recompensed. And some of these recompenses make it sound like really they were working for you for 7 years. They shan't just go out with nothing. Moving to the next one. And sometimes, by the way, we scholars rush in with to douse the fires and say, well, we don't really know if they really did this every 7 years. Well, maybe it's a nice law. Okay, if it's a nice law that can be skipped, then we have the 7 commandments all wrong. See, they're just suggestions. They're like red lights in Florida. You know, think about it, but you don't have to follow it. No, this is law. If law doesn't matter, then it doesn't. Third of the 3 acts of distribution. Lands are fallowed every 7 years. And we say again, well, but that's just good agriculture. You know, it lets the minerals be replenished and the farmers get a rest. This is just agricultural policy. Yeah, read the text. Again, when all else fails, read the text. The land gets a rest. The 7th year, a complete rest for the land. Of course, you get a rest too, but the land. You may eat what it yields. You can't work it. You, here we go again. You, your male and female slave, your hired and your bound laborers who live with you, livestock, and the wild animals. Here's a new one. The wild animals. It's like we're verging out across creation. Okay, moving to the next slide then. We're into the Sabbath year. And I want to look at this I'm framing it with the winds from Girona, as it were. This jubilee is, of course, every 50th years, after a year of years, as it were, after 49 years. I want to look at four things. First of all, here's the principle of distributive justice that guides this whole thing. God speaking from Leviticus, priestly code again, of course. The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. With me you are but resident aliens and tenant farmers. That's no way to run an economy. If I can't go selling my land, how do I get yours? After all, it's all about keeping mine and getting yours. And you're telling us, yeah, you are stewards of another's land. Yes, you're in charge. Yes, you're in charge, but you don't own it. You're a steward. I go straight back to creation, of course. All right. Second point about the Jubilee. Here's an example of distributive justice. The only case, I suppose, in the whole Bible, maybe, well, I guess if you leave out Cain and things like that, where the God of Israel actually distributes food. And it's the manna in the desert. And this is the way God sets up the collection of the manna. If you want to know what daily bread looks like, Exodus 26 is where you go. God says, go out and gather 3.5 pounds per, he's speaking probably to the tent dwelling people, of course, and to the ruler of of each tent, maybe you might say here, the patriarch, the father of the tent. Take up 3.5 pounds, and you will find that it's exactly what each person needs. Well, if you pick up 3.5 pounds, say for 8 people in your tent, some of them will be, shut up. Each will find out it's as much as they need. It's like magic food. And if you think, well, I'm going to take a little more, none of this 3, I go 5 pounds. It'll breed worms and becomes foul. Now, the Sabbath day, when you go out the day before, then you can do a 2-day supply and it won't. So all of this is like an example of distributive justice with God distributing the food. It's magic food, of course, but so it's a good story. Moving to the third point. Here's the principle of distributive injustice. Injustice. Or if you prefer, how is it going with the 1% of Israel 2,700 years ago? Says Isaiah, you who join house to house, who add field to field, until there is no room for, there is room for no one but you, and you're left to live alone in the midst of the land. And if you're just thinking to yourself, well, that's really not nice, that's not polite, then hear this one verse from the Bible, the most searing verse in the Bible. We should write it on our bathroom walls in the morning, so it's the first thing we see every misty dawn, bleary-eyed dawn. Injustice shakes the foundations of the earth. Not just it displeases God, but God's a softie. There's always forgiveness and mercy and all that good stuff. Injustice shakes the foundations of the earth. Moving then to the next slide. An example of distributive injustice. And this is the classic case of Naboth, who refuses to sell his vineyard because he says you're not supposed to sell your ancestral inheritance. And King Ahab of Samaria makes him a very good deal, very fair deal. I give you a good exchange for it. And poor old Naboth says, I can't do it. And then Queen Jezebel, of Sidon, who is Ahab's queen, and she comes from a different economic policy. She can't understand. It's not right. If the king offers to give you a good deal, noblesse oblige or eminent domain, you should certainly sell. So she has Naboth killed and gives her husband the vineyard, which is a different way of handling distributive justice. All right, moving then to the next one, and we're coming to the end of the first part. Here's my slogan. The Sabbath vision of distributive justice that we have just seen, the Sabbath vision of distributive justice, is not just humanity getting a rest from the world, but the world getting a rest from humanity. Okay, a rest for the world from us. Getting that from Philo's explanation of the Sabbath. He says it's a relief and relaxation of labor, not to the free person only, to the slaves, the beasts of burden, every description of animal, every species of plant and tree. There is no shoot, no branch, no leaf, which is allowed to be cut or plucked on that day, nor any fruit, which it is lawful to gather. But everything is at liberty and safety from us on that day, and enjoys, as it were, perfect freedom. That's what Sabbath is about. It's not about what we have done to it in Judaism and Christianity, when it was observed. I mean, all these rules, you can't do this, you can't do that, which is intended to desecrate the Sabbath in practice, so we don't have to face its challenge, which is a challenge from creation to us as its stewards. All right, then, moving to the next slide, I'm moving to my second part, the escalatory violence of civilization in Genesis 4, 1-26. And I'm insisting that I'm not just reading it in there in late interpretation. I'm saying that the priestly authors who wrote Genesis 1 were aware. I'm going back. I think Genesis 4 is aware of it itself. It might say, well, that's the way life is, so what can you do? But Genesis 4 is aware of the escalatory violence of civilization. So let's move then to the next slide. Mesopotamia, as you know, it's the Greek for between the rivers, Euphrates and the Tigris. You can see how they almost come together like a wine glass around Babylon, Baghdad. Civilization arises in Mesopotamia, modern Iraq. It's also the graveyard of civilizations and empires. The time we call the dawn of civilization. I didn't make up that term. Around 10,000 to 6,000 BCE, the dawn of civilization is in Mesopotamia. Civilization kind of starts there. Of course, human beings were around long before, as we know, but civilization as a specific culture arises in Mesopotamia. Settle down. Place, we call it the cradle of civilization. The Neolithic agricultural revolution climaxed there. If you're looking at the cradle of civilization, you might want to ask, what rocked that cradle? Was it rocked by escalatory violence and imperialism? Moving to the next slide. I'm taking you through Genesis 4. These images are taken from the scene of Genesis in Palermo Mariale Cathedral, with great gratitude to Sarah, spending a whole day with her arms holding up the camera to get these magnificent photographs. You begin, of course, with the cultural normalcy of civilization. God chooses Abel over Cain. The sacrifice of Abel is sheep. The sacrifice of Cain is grain. Abel is the shepherd, the herder. Cain is the farmer. Why does God choose the sheep? I don't think God particularly prefers sheep to grain or anything else, or blood to non-blood. But God, consistently in Genesis, being a countercultural norm, goes for the younger son because culture goes for the older son. The older son is the heir apparent, to family, farm, or kingdom. So God tends to choose the younger son. You might get a message from there. But in any case, in the first scene, when they offer sacrifice, God prefers the sacrifice of the younger son, Abel to the older son, Cain. Moving then to the next slide, you know what happens, of course. But this is the first time the word sin appears in the Bible. God warns Cain that sin is crouching like a beast outside the flap of his tent. That's the model you're imagining. It's like a beast ready to pounce on you when you come out. But then God insists that you, Cain, should be able to overcome it. Sin is not some primordial, intractable genetic trait and you're stuck with it and what can you do? No. Cain is culpable. And this is what I would call original sin. I mean, it's the first time sin is used in the Bible. It just ain't in chapter 2 or 3, and neither is punishment mentioned or disobedience. And the Bible is not slow to mention punishment or disobedience, but it just ain't in chapters 2 and 3. Wow, is it in chapter 4? And, Patrick, dear Augustine, it's not about sex then. Original sin, if you want to use the word, is about violence. And as we will see, it's about escalatory violence. So if we're using violence today, we're not using the club that's used by Cain. So moving to the next slide. What you'd expect now, if you've been reading the Bible ahead of time, okay, now God's got to punish Cain. Let him have it, Cain. He deserves it. And what God does in the story is try desperately, as it were, to stop the escalation of violence as the generations, the tribe, shall we say, of Cain, because I already got a tribe, by the way, in the story, goes after, or the tribe of Abel goes after the tribe of Cain. God marks Cain so that nobody will touch him. God tries to stop the vengeance that he knows is going to have. What you're imagining, by the way, is the desert tribal blood feud. You're not yet up to war or anything like that. But the important thing is God tries to stop it. He warns Cain. He warns Cain, I put a mark on you so nobody will kill you. Moving to the next one. All right. Now, here's where I get to escalatory violence. And that's hyphenated for me in the same way that justice is hyphenated distributive justice. We're talking about the escalatory nature of violence. If you're thinking of the first century, what we're worried about today is not the swords of the Roman legions or their javelins. It's about weapons of mass destruction. That's what I mean. So, in the Yahweh source, Genesis 4, civilization is created by Cain and his descendants through Lamech. This is all in the same chapter. So Cain is the firstborn son. He's the farmer. Abel is the secondborn son as the shepherd, as we saw. And these are based and adapting and retelling the Sumerian story of the two brother, the farmer god in Kimdu and the shepherd god Duwuzudo. They make peace. They don't kill one another. But in our story, Cain produces Enoch, Irad, Mehujael, and Methuselah, and then Lamech. Lamech has two wives and two sons from one wife, a son and a daughter from the other. And I've left the daughter's name Naamah in a lowercase because she does not take part in any way in the, what shall I call it, the escalatory violence of Lamech's generations. So moving to the next one, let's watch it. This is Lamech boasting to his wives. He's a hunter. You can see his bow and arrow that he used to bow. Okay, Cain invents the first city. I don't know how many people know that. Cain invents the first city. I don't know if that's good news, really. Then Lamech's son Jabal invents tents and livestock. Lamech's Jubal invents lyres and pipes. Lamech's Tubal-Cain, three of his sons, invents bronze and iron tools. And then Lamech himself invents escalatory violence and is proud of it. He boasts, I have killed a man for wounding me. A young man, this is poetic parallel, of course. It's not two. A young man for striking me. You strike me, I kill you. That's what I mean by escalatory violence. And in case we miss it, if Cain is avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech, you touch Lamech, and my tribe will come after you 77-fold. That is the definition of escalatory violence, and it is the grand finale of Genesis chapter 4. Moving then to our next slide. This is marvelous. This is a medieval legend. It's obviously not in the Bible, but you can see our paintings in Palermo and Monreale Cathedral and in the Palatine Palace. They can't stop. I mean, it's not right that Cain isn't punished. This is us speaking. I mean, okay, God doesn't want to punish him. God's trying to stop the escalation of violence. Well, we don't agree with that. We'll do it. So here's the story. You have good old Lamech there on the left. He's a hunter, as we saw, and he's got his bow and arrow, but he's blind, which must make it a little difficult to hunt. But in any case, he has probably Tubal-Cain, his son. You see the young boy down at the bottom there. He is telling him where to shoot. He hears some movement ahead of time, usually shown in a thicket, but it's hard to show Cain if he's in a thicket. So Cain is there, and guided by Tubal-Cain, Lamech shoots at this, presumably like a gazelle or something in the thicket, and he kills Cain. So he finally got him. And then, by the way, Lamech is so, what should I say, chagrined or terrified that he has killed Cain, which he wasn't supposed to do, that he kills the son. So even there, it begins with Cain, it escalates with Lamech. Moving to the next slide. Okay, let's have a practical demonstration. 4,600 years ago, here's a magnificent battle mosaic, lapis lazuli. It's a magnificent mosaic from Ur in Sumer. It's one side of it looks like it might be a box, and the other side is the festival. This is the actual victory itself, and then, of course, the feast will come next. So take a look at it. You can see the king in the middle of the top row and his courtiers around him. And down, and that's his chariot over to the left. No warriors in it. Prisoners in the middle, his retainers and prisoners. And down below, you can see the chariots. They're drawn by wild asses, onyx, onager, I think, onager they're called. 4 to a chariot, 4-wheel chariot, with a driver and a spearsman, I suppose you'd call him, a warrior at least in each. So there's 2 people in each, and you can see the bodies of fallen, defeated opponents underneath the hooves of the wild asses, wild donkeys. Okay, now go from that to the next slide. And this, let me be very clear, is taking a good look at us, at Homo sapiens. No, not at other people, not at others, at us, including myself. Homo sapiens and escalatory violence. It took us only 4,500 years from Sumerian battle chariots to Sherman tanks. That's what I mean by escalatory violence. We're really, really good at it. if violence was simply the same level throughout all of time, you might be able to say, well, it's just the weather. What can you do about the weather? Okay, I'm sorry, that's not a good illustration. Yeah, we found out we can do a lot about the weather to make it worse. So Homo sapiens and escalatory violence, what we are asking behind these slides, behind all of this, with the Bible, without the Bible, with God, without God, are we a sustainable species? Are we a sustainable species? Or, like the saber-toothed tiger, a magnificent one, but a doomed one? And if we know that, will we do anything about it? Moving to the next slide, which is even more devastating. It took us only 3,000 years to get from those iron swords and that Iron Age fortress behind them, it's in Ireland actually, to atomic bombs. 3,000 years? Wow. Moving to the next, and oh yeah, okay, this is a quotation from Paul the Pharisee. I redid that one up above to show our spread and how fast our species, I'm talking now particularly about Homo sapiens, spread across the world. We left Africa and populated the earth, left Africa, at least our species now, our particular species, at least 70,000 to 100,000 years ago. And this is a quotation. Sorry, it's from me. The bitter, not the better, but the bitter angels of our nature declared an integrated threefold onslaught on the world. I hope we didn't know we were doing it, but that's what we were doing. On the physical environment, resulting now in ever accelerating climate change, on all other species, resulting now in ever accelerating here. Again, I keep saying accelerating biodiversity loss, and on ourselves, resulting now in ever accelerating weapons of mass destruction. We endanger ourselves atomically, biologically, chemically, demographically, ecologically, and we are only up to E in our apocalyptic alphabet. That's from Paul the Pharisee, because that's really what that book, Paul the Pharisee, is about. Are we a sustainable species? Looking not at prophecy. I'm not doing prophecy, I'm doing trajectory. This is what we are tending, have done in the past. This is what we are liable to be doing in the future. What about acceleration and escalation? And then finally, I want to look at one final postscript, but I really want it as a prescript. This is, after all, homebrewed Christianity. I want to look at that image. It's from the cathedral ceiling of the Florence Baptistery dedicated to John the Baptist. It's Jesus in final judgment. But what I'm interested in is not the final judgment. I'm interested in those wounds. If we crucify the witness to nonviolent resistance, if we crucified the witness to nonviolent resistance, because that is the way of the world, that's going to judge us. So my suggestion, my hope, prayer, nonviolent resistance is how you love your enemies. I can't understand any other way that Jesus would have said, love your enemies. He could have said, as Leviticus does, love your neighbor as yourself, love the resident alien as yourself. That's what, Leviticus 19. Instead of saying that, he should have said, love everyone. That takes care of your enemies. Why would he say, love your enemies? Because Jesus is advocating nonviolent resistance as the only way to stop accelerating violence. You use violence against it, you'll just accelerate it. If we are not a doomed species, then we will have to use nonviolent resistance. And that is how you love, by nonviolence, your enemies. Because the message I get from Jesus is, do you really think that if you try to create post-civilization, civilization which has been around for 10,000 years, let us say, will go quietly into that good night without a response against you? Do you really think it's that easy? If we are not a doomed species, those for whom being a doomed species is profitable, short term granted, but at least profitable in the short term, will oppose you. All right, and that is my presentation.